Please join me in the spirit of prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I love that Paul read both versions. It's a good reminder that we sometimes have emotional attachments to the way things sound or the way we remember it being read. And so, I don't know, Paul, but I could guess that maybe King James feels more comforting, right? It's interesting how that works. So I have a confession to make this morning. I am a championship sleeper. You didn't hear that wrong. I can take a nap at most times of the day and have no problem going to sleep at the reasonable hour of 9 p.m., and typically no residual effect from my nap. Pop out of my bed, I go about my business, no disorientation or lag. I'm not sure if that makes me extraordinarily gifted or depressed, but nonetheless, that is my reality, and it's been true for a long, long time in my life. So you can imagine my surprise one day when I awoke and I rolled over looking for Nora and found no one next to me. And then I looked at the clock and it said 5:30. And while I laid there wondering where Nora was, because Nora does not like mornings at all, I realized it was light outside. I was so confused. It's 5:30, it's light outside, and Nora is out of bed. What is going on? I wondered if it might be like the rapture or something like that. Well, you may have guessed it. It was 5:30 p.m., and I was waking up from a nap. A nap where I had apparently slept so soundly that when I awoke, I was sure I was awakening from a good night's sleep, and I was totally disoriented. It was a visceral and shocking experience. Has that ever happened to any of you? Nora hates taking naps for that very reason, and I never understood until now. Our theme for this week's series is We Are Made for the Beloved. Wendy Farley, whose book is the basis of the series, says that we have forgotten our identity as God's beloveds. And she argues that because of that, we find ourselves making false meaning of our life experiences, misunderstanding God, hence failing to experience the love that God has for us. Because I had no idea that I was awakening from a nap, I tried to make meaning of what was happening to me. Nora's not in the bed, it's 5:30, it's light outside. I really struggled for some time trying to understand. If I had known that it was 5:30 p.m., quickly I would have figured that out. What Farley is saying is that we are oblivious to the fact that we are God's beloveds. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Unfortunately, some that are very entrenched in theology. It's not uncommon when we make sense of suffering to say that God is punishing us, or we feel like God is punishing us. And that prevents us from experiencing God's infinite love for us. You can't be infinitely loved and punished in the way that we understand it. We cut ourselves off from God thinking that God is cutting us off, right? Like that's the punishment. We think God has forgotten us or God is intentionally causing bad things to happen to us, but that's not the truth. God is not cutting us off. We are making that meaning. It's our need to make logical meaning of the world that defines that. One of the things I find interesting in Farley's writing is the emphasis on moving from the mind to the spirit. The idea being that God is beyond our thinking. As soon as we try to fit God into logical structures, we make God too small. That's not what helps us experience God. What helps us to experience God is the ability to sit in our spirits and just be. Anybody have a hard time with that? Because we have to remember we cannot understand God. It's a mystery. It's bigger than our intellect. And so we have to find a way to give ourselves over to the mystery. And we have to recognize that trying to explain God, give language to God, limits God because our language is limited. So for just a moment, I want to invite you to try something with me. I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. If it's not, just find a place to focus. And I want you to remember a time when you felt loved. Think about what was happening. Who was there? What's in your photograph? Replay the memory in your head and experience it again. And then go one step further and pay attention to how this feels in your body. It could be that your chest feels warm. It could be that you feel a sense of energy in your core. You might have an extreme awareness of calm all over. It's not going to be the same for everyone, and there is not a right answer. To see if you can notice what is true for you. If you have your eyes closed, you can open them and gently come back to the space. Here's what Farley says about what you just felt. What you just recalled and experienced, that is a drop in the bucket with regards to how God feels about you. A drop in the bucket. This is a 2-confession morning, so here's my second one. I tend to avoid gay pride parades. Do you know why? I cannot watch a gay pride parade without weeping. I have a visceral response to watching the crowds of people watching the parade, clapping and cheering people on. And to be honest, it's not just gay pride. I have this at many parades, but gay pride is particularly poignant for me. And I'm not totally sure why this happens, but thinking about it more, I think it has to do with the demonstration of what looks like unconditional love and acceptance. Right? You have these groups of people, they don't even know each other usually. But boy, is there a supportive connection. People standing and exuding love for people like me. a love that sometimes my self-conscious wonders if I deserve. And it's so overwhelming for me to experience that sensation of love that wraps around me like a blanket, that I find myself sobbing. Sobbing because of the beauty of what I'm witnessing, and sobbing because in those moments I also experience acceptance and love. And I think in those moments I'm finally catching a glimpse of the reality of God's love for me. It's being modeled by the world around me, the spectators and the participants in the parade. But what's true is that love is there with or without the parade. But I suspect that being able to feel that love makes me so uncomfortable that I just try to avoid it. I choose to forget about it, to push it away. Who am I for God to love me like that? I'm a flawed human being. But the more I separate myself from that love, the more I try to make logical sense of the world, the further I get from the mystery and reality of God. We read this morning from the Psalms. And like many Psalms, our psalm this morning talks about God being with the psalmist. This is not about God producing something concrete in response to the psalmist's request. This is about the psalmist recognizing the reality of God's presence, recognizing that no matter what, God's love for us abides. And when we return to that, when we let that reality in, everything else around us softens and our compassion expands. God is not a magic genie who grants wishes or a supreme judge who doles out punishment. God is the spectator at our parade, cheering us on, conveying love and kindness, ready to come along should we stumble or trip, right there with us every step of the way. And if we can only open ourselves to tolerating our own discomfort that comes when we recognize love so deep that will not let us go, then we can just begin to experience 2 drops in the bucket of God's love for us. Amen. you.